My name's Gina. I gave my whole life to my husband, raised his children, cooked his meals, kept his secrets, and on our 30th anniversary, in front of everyone we love, he looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're old news." My own daughter didn't even flinch. But what really broke me wasn't what they said. It's what they planned behind my back, years of betrayal I never saw coming. So I started digging. And what I found, well, that's when everything changed. I spent 6 months planning that night. 6 long months, clipping coupons, picking up extra shifts at the diner, digging into the little savings I had tucked away in a coffee tin behind the flower jar. That's how much this meant to me. 30 years with Percy wasn't just a number. It was a life built brick by brick. I wanted something beautiful, something worthy. I told myself, 30 years is a blessing. Every time I doubted whether I could pull it off. I chose the banquet hall on Cascade Road because it reminded me of the place we had our first dance. I wore the burgundy velvet dress Mama gave me before she passed. Still smelled faintly of her perfume. I thought it was fitting something borrowed, something remembered. The room sparkled. Candles, soft jazz, a spread of collard greens, baked mac, catfish, Percy's favorites. Our children were there. Dishon with his new wife. Thanks in advance, all smiles and whispers. My sister Loretta brought sweet tea and that too loud laugh. Even Percy's old army buddy, Big Mike, showed up with his oxygen tank and a wink. And me? I stood by the door, greeting everyone, feeling like a queen in her castle. I had spent decades holding this family together, quietly, faithfully. I thought tonight, maybe, Percy would see me. He clinked his glass around 8:15. Everyone went quiet. Cameras out. A room full of black excellence, love, and fried catfish. He cleared his throat. 30 years, he began, raising his glass. I smiled. Then he said, "You'll know what they say. Women age like wine unless you married the wrong bottle." Laughter. Not a roar, but enough to slap me in the chest. "I should have gone with my second choice, yo," he added, chuckling. "But hey, she can cook." The room shifted. Some folks laughed. Most looked uncomfortable. I felt like I left my body. I kept smiling, nodding politely. But inside, something shattered. Something I didn't even know was fragile. My hand gripped the stem of my champagne glass so tight, I felt the crack before I saw it. I didn't let it drop. I didn't let myself cry. Just stared at Percy as he basked in the spotlight, his moment. I noticed Dishon and thanks in advance exchange a look. Not shock, not confusion, just acknowledgement. As if they knew this was coming. That cut deeper than any joke Percy could make. At home, I waited until the house got quiet. Dishes in the sink, leftovers packed. Percy sat in his recliner, flipping through channels like nothing had happened. I sat across from him, still in my dress. "I want to talk about what you said tonight," I said. He didn't look up. "You're still mad about that?" "Come on, Gina. It was a joke." "A joke? In front of our children? Our friends?" He looked at me like I was the unreasonable one. You always been sensitive. That's your problem. I swallowed the heat rising in my chest. You haven't been yourself in years, he added. You used to be fun. Now you just nag. The man I supported through 3 job losses, the man I stood by when he had nothing but dreams and a busted pickup truck. I worked 2 jobs when he went back to school. Missed holidays, birthdays, my own health so he could succeed. And now I was not fun. I didn't respond. I just stood up, walked to the bedroom, and opened the bottom drawer of my nightstand. My journal, dusty, bent at the edges. I hadn't written in it in over 15 years. Last entry, Dishon's high school graduation. I opened to a blank page and started writing. Not poetry, not dreams, just facts. How it felt to be betrayed with a smile. How silence can be louder than a scream. How 30 years could disappear in a single punchline. Later, I went to hang up Percy's jacket. As I checked the pockets, a folded note fell out. Next time, don't forget to bring the blue dress. See, I stood there, jacket in hand, note between my fingers, staring into the quiet room like it held the answer. The note stayed in my palm long after I found it. My fingers clenched around it so tight the edges left an imprint. Next time, don't forget to bring the blue dress. See. I read it over and over until the words no longer made sense, until they felt like someone else's nightmare, but it was mine. Last night, when Percy disappeared during the toast, said he needed to check something in the car. I remember thinking how strange it was, how often he glanced at his phone when no one else was around. Every vibration, every chime, and he'd lean away, shielding the screen like a teenager hiding secrets. It wasn't the first time I noticed, but last night I paid attention. See, that letter used to mean something sweet. Back in the day, Percy would whisper, "My sea, my calm," when we were young and foolish. But now it felt like a slap. Like whoever wrote this note was claiming a piece of my life I hadn't given up. I didn't sleep much. The note went into my Bible, pressed between Proverbs and Ecclesiastes. That's where I put things I can't carry out loud. And when I closed the cover, I looked at my palm. That faint scratch from the broken champagne glass, still red. A quiet reminder. The morning crept in like fog. I made eggs, butter toast, fried 2 slices of turkey bacon, Percy's usual. But he didn't come to the table. Just hollered from the hallway, "I'm heading out," meeting an old friend from work. He didn't wait for me to answer. Didn't kiss my cheek like he used to. Didn't even glance back. I sat there alone, staring at the 2 plates. My own food tasted like paper. Around 10, D. Shaw and Thanks in Advance dropped by. Too chipper. Thanks in Advance held a small envelope of printed photos from the party and said, "We just couldn't wait to give you these, Mama G." Her smile stretched too far. I nodded, opened the envelope. A picture of me frozen mid-laugh. Another of Percy, arms wide like a showman. Then one where Thanks in Advance caught me looking at him after the toast. You could see it in my eyes. That breaking. Thanks. In advance leaned closer and said, "That was such a fun night. You handled it like a queen." Her voice sweet as syrup, but something behind it curled sharp. "Why today?" I asked. Dishon scratched his neck. "Just figured you'd like to see the photos." They didn't stay long, just long enough to look me in the eye, pretend nothing had happened, and vanish. As soon as they left, I opened the laptop, checked our joint bank card. I never used to. Percy always handled bills. There it was. La Maison Bleue, $162.48. I blinked hard. That's no fast food joint. That's where folks propose or celebrate promotions, not where you grab a beer with an old work buddy. The charge was from the same night he said he was at a retirement party. My mother used to say, "A woman's gut is God whispering through her soul." I didn't always listen, but now that whisper was a roar. I started writing dates, receipts, names. I bought a small black notebook and slid it under the mattress. I wasn't just watching anymore. I was documenting. I did laundry that afternoon, kept my hands moving so my mind wouldn't spin. Percy's jacket still smelled like cologne. I reached into the pockets to empty them, and that's when I found it. A scarf. Silk, blue, with tiny white feathers. Not mine. I never wore scarves. And Percy? He used to say scarves made him feel claustrophobic. I stood still, scarf in one hand, laundry in the other. My chest didn't rise. I just breathed through my nose and placed it inside the closet, far back on the top shelf. Later, my phone buzzed. It was Dishon. "Hey, Mama, everything all right?" "You tell me," I answered. Long pause. Then he said, I wanted to say I love you. You seen your daddy today?" "No, I think he caught himself. He's probably at the shop or something." "You were about to say something else." Silence. "You said Dad's been seeing that lady again." "Who's the lady?" "I didn't." "Mama, I didn't mean anything by that. I gotta go." He hung up. I sat down on the edge of the bed, picked up the photo from last night, the one where I wasn't smiling. I thought back to my 40th birthday. Percy had said he forgot, said he'd been busy, but there was lipstick on his collar that night too. This ain't new. It's just louder now. I walked into church alone the next Sunday morning, my dress still warm from last night, my pride still unsettled. The pews filled up fast. People greeted me with smiles and congratulations, as if nothing had cracked. I returned each nod, voice low, heart heavy. They assumed everything had gone well. They assumed I'd be glowing. I sat before the sermon began, my palms folded, mind racing. The pastor spoke about marriage as covenant, betrayal as a wound that scars deep. Every word throbbed in me. I sat there, my face calm, but tears threatened. I closed my eyes, wishing I could vanish under the hymn. Then I heard laughter in the balcony, a voice so familiar. My eyes opened. The deacon's wife stood, wearing the same blue dress I'd once treasured. The dress Percy had given me years ago. The dress now felt stolen. As service ended, I drifted to the foyer, coffee in hand, as people chatted. I replayed scenes from last night, big and small, the woman who stepped close to Percy, whispering in his ear. I remember the way Percy's shoulders tensed when she left. I remember the soft chuckle she gave, exactly like one Percy used in private calls. At the time, I ignored it. Now it tastes bitter. Back home, the sunlight filtered in through lace curtains. In the kitchen, an envelope resting on the counter. Percy's name across it. Inside, a receipt from the Blue Lounge dinner for two nights before the celebration. Percy told me he was too tired to go to that fundraiser we'd been invited to. He lied. I held that slip of paper, the edges soft under my fingertip, and I knew the lie was intentional. I compared the handwriting to a note he once wrote me on Mother's Day, unmistakable. I didn't storm into his office. I didn't demand answers. I stood in my bedroom, journal in hand, meditative, careful. I understood that confrontation would bring deflection, excuses, silence. Instead, I would wait, I would watch, I would hold my ground. I wrote, "You think I don't see you, Percy, but I saw you long ago." And beneath it, I scribbled one word, Clarice. My finger hovered on the page. Tomorrow, I would call her. I closed the journal, shut my eyes, felt the full weight of knowing. The one who humiliated me in front of everyone had done more than insult, he had betrayed. I was in the living room early, sorting through photo albums, pages of birthdays, graduations, church picnics. I paused at her baby picture, the one where Dijon beamed at me with arms wide. I put the album down just as my phone buzzed. "Mom, thanks in advance, and I will swing by, just want to say hey." My heart tightened. I'd braced myself for this moment long before I knew it'd come. They arrived moments later. The smiles were in place. The pleasantries offered as if nothing had shifted. Thanks in advance's tone had an edge too polished. Dijon barely looked at me. When thanks in advance said, "I hope you found your worth tonight, Mama," her voice cracked like glass. That warmth was forced. My mind drifted to years I raised him, made sacrifices, held things together while caring for Percy's dreams. Was that all forgotten? Over dinner, the knife came steady. Dijon said, "It was harmless." "Mom, don't make things bigger than they are." Thanks in advance added, "Sometimes you carry the past too heavy, people move forward." Their voices blended into a burden I'd carried too long. I watched them sit across from me, faces familiar but distant. I thought of choir nights where he cheered for me. Now he defended the man who humiliated me in public. Then thanks in advance rose to go. She stood in the doorway, pursed lips and all. "Good night, Mama. Try to rest." She paused, eyes twinkling with a calculated code. Then she said, "You always did play the help so well." That line hung heavy. My breath hitched, my hand pressed to my chest. Dijon nodded and stood thanks in advance slipped out. The door clicked shut. I sat there. Silence filled the room. The walls felt closer. Tears wanted to spill. But I stayed still, my eyes on the plate before me, my mind reeling. I replayed what she said over and over. Play the help so well. How many years was I treated like help, but invisible help? Later, in the dim hallway light, I retrieved my journal from my bedside table. My pen hovered. I wrote, I never asked to be a servant in the house I built. A cough from behind startled me. I knew Percy was in the next room. I opened my hand to see the scratch on the broken champagne glass I squeezed months ago, still there, reminding me of that betrayal. I took a breath, steadying the storm inside. I lifted my phone and typed a message for Deschamps. Come by tomorrow. I want to show you something. I knew then the war had turned. This wasn't about relics or insults anymore. It was about respect, about truth, about reclaiming what had always been mine. Morning came slow. I woke before the sun, body still stiff from tension. The hush in the house felt louder than any shout. I moved through rooms, living room, hall, kitchen. Every creak echoed like footsteps I couldn't follow. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of weak coffee, staring out the window. Birds chirped as if nothing was wrong. I turned the brooch over in my palm. That little piece of metal had been silence's witness. I pulled out old letters I hid in the drawer notes from our early years, promises I believed with all my heart. I traced the ink with my finger, remembering his voice, the laughter we shared, the vows we whispered. I whispered to myself, I once believed every vow, now I fear every silence. Quiet weighed more these days than thunder. I needed something, anything. So I walked out to the garage. I found the old decorations box for the anniversary lights, ribbons, photo stands. I dug deeper. Covered in dust, in a battered plastic bin, were mementos. Our wedding album, name plaques with our names side by side. Baby shoes I saved from Deschamps' first steps. They were stained, edges curled as though time or neglect had eaten at them. My heart twisted when I reached in and saw one of the pages falling apart. And in that same bin, hidden under bubble wrap, I found an envelope. Percy's name was written across it. I pulled it open. Reservation for the Blue Lounge, 9 p.m. 2 guests, dated 2 nights before the anniversary. My chest tightened. The man told me he was too tired to go out. Now I held proof he wasn't. Betrayal had become tangible. My mind flashed back to our 10th anniversary. Percy surprised me with that same wedding album, filled with new photographs, new promises. I smiled then, believing in forever. I believed we had a forever. Now I stood in this garage, the weight of years pressing down, the silent absence more pronounced than ever. Back in the house, I lit the stove and started making lunch something I wouldn't share. I called Eugene, my friend, an old confidant. My voice steady. We need to talk. Something's wrong. I hung up and drafted a letter to Deschamps. I didn't demand, didn't accuse. I asked, what have I missed? Then the phone buzzed. Unknown number. My eyes flicked to the screen. I know where she goes tomorrow night. My heart jolted, then slowed. Who was watching? who lived in shadows and whispered names. I closed my eyes, pressing my forehead against my palm. Silence almost collapsed me. But this time, I resolved I would not break. My phone buzzed while I rinsed dishes in the sink. A text from an unknown number. He took her scarf. She left it behind. My hand froze mid-motion. The scarf, the one I found in Percy's closet earlier, flooded my mind. My breath hitched. I dropped the sponge and tried calling Percy. Ring, ring, straight to voicemail. A familiar dread settled in my chest. Fear. But under it, something sharper, colder, a hunger for proof. I wiped my hands and walked to the living room, trying to steady my breathing. Before I could piece thoughts, the doorbell rang. A neighbor, Mrs. Carter, stood on the full threshold with a casserole dish. Just bringing something over? She smiled. Moments later, I noticed it thanks in advance's blue scarf hanging from Percy's coat rack in the hallway. My stomach melted. Mrs. Carter remarked how lovely thanks in advance looked last night, her voice kind but loaded. I nodded, said thanks, offered coffee. All the while, my mind logged every detail. The fabric, its pattern, its presence. Inside, I allowed laughter to fill the room as Mrs. Carter talked about neighborhood gossip and Sunday church choir. I poured coffee, held my calm like armor. Inside, I was watching every twitch, every glance. The scarf was the evidence that betrayal had graduated into performance. Later, when Mrs. Carter left, I sat on the sofa and reached between the cushions. My fingers curled around a crumpled receipt. La Maison Bleue, the same place tied to receipts I found earlier. Then, a penciled note, "Meet me 9 p.m., don't be late." My heart pounded so loud I feared the walls would hear. The handwriting matched that jotted note from Percy's jacket. This was no coincidence. This was calculated. The evening deepened. I considered walking outside, shouting accusations, demanding answers. But instead, I waited. I let silence do the work. Then Deschamps walked in. No preamble. His eyes flicked to the scarf, then to the receipt I placed on the coffee table. He didn't expect confrontation. He stammered, "Mom, I slid the note closer." He swallowed. I asked, voice low but controlled, "Why, Deschamps? Why her?" He blinked. The room held its breath. His voice cracked. "I'm helping," he asked me to. He trailed off. I pressed on. "Helping how? In what way?" His jaw clenched. He stared at the paper. I saw shame flicker. Then he blurted, "You'd never understand. It was never supposed to be you." Silence crashed over me. The accusation hung in the air. Betrayal performed under soft lights, in polite words, but with deadly intent. I stared at him, steady, my body quiet, my resolve loud. In that moment, I realized I needed more than answers. I needed justice. I came home just before dark. The house felt wrong. The kind of wrong you can't explain, but your bones know it. The living room lights were low, a single lamp glowing against the window. On the counter, one wine glass, half empty, the lipstick not mine. The faint scent of roses lingered in the air, too fresh to be from me. I stood in the doorway for a long minute, letting the silence wrap around me. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere, a floorboard creaked. I thought of Deshawn's voice from earlier that day, soft and nervous. "You'd never understand, Mama." I thought of Thanks in Advance's cold smile, her words sharp enough to scar. I started down the hallway and froze. The door to Percy's study was cracked open. Light spilled through the gap. Two voices whispered inside, low and close. I recognized Thanks in Advance's laugh, then her sudden hush when she saw my shadow move across the wall. For a moment, the air between us went still. Percy turned his head, pretending to read a paper on his desk. Thanks in Advance tucked her hair behind her ear, voice brittle, forced. "Oh, hi, Mama." I said nothing. I just stood there, meeting Percy's eyes. Then I turned, walked away, each step deliberate. Back in the living room, I sat down and stared at the family portrait above the fireplace, 3 smiles that once meant home. I don't know how long I sat before I stood again. I went to the dining table and laid down the copy of the Blue Lounge receipt. The evidence. The truth. The door opened quietly behind me. Deshawn. He stopped when he saw it. His face changed guilt, fear, shame, all flickering at once. "I want the truth," I said. "You've been lying to me for too long." He rubbed the back of his neck, eyes down. "I didn't know it was hurting you." "That's not an answer," I said flatly. "Then tell me, whose scarf was it?" He swallowed. His lips parted, but the words didn't come. "Mama, I can't." "Yes, you can." I cut in. "You owe me that much." But he couldn't meet my eyes. His silence said more than anything. I felt something in me tighten, something that used to bend. It wouldn't bend anymore. I turned from him and opened the drawer under the cabinet where I kept my jewelry. My hand brushed the empty box. My wedding ring was gone. I stood still, the air heavy around me. Then, from the TV across the room, a muted video caught my eye. Shireen Percy's assistant smiling into a camera, and around her wrist, gleaming under the light, my ring on a silver chain. I picked up the phone and dialed. "Shireen?" I said when she answered. "Why is my ring on your hand?" A pause, then a shaky laugh. "Oh, that I borrowed it for a photo shoot," Percy said. I hung up. My hands didn't shake. My breathing was even. But inside me, something old and quiet split open. I walked back into the study, closed the door behind me, and laid everything out on the desk. The receipts, the scarf, the photographs, the notes, every piece of proof that had once whispered now screamed in silence. I opened my journal and began to write. I refused to live in quiet shame. Then I picked up the phone again, dialed Eugene. "It's time," I said. "I'm ready." As I ended the call, I spoke aloud to the empty room. "You don't get to humiliate me and go on living like nothing happened. Not anymore." I gathered the papers into neat stacks. For once, my hands were steady. Then, behind me, I heard it click. the sound of a lock turning. I turned slowly. Percy stood in the doorway, the key still in his hand. His face calm, unreadable. I walked into the gala with my chest steady. The hall gleamed under chandeliers, tables draped in white. I pinned the brooch to my lapel, Mama's piece so it caught flashes from every camera lens. Faces lit up when they saw me, some warm, many wary. Percy stood at the head table, hand extended. He kissed my cheek politely, smiling like nothing had changed. "You see what tonight is about," he whispered. Thanks in advance, and Dishon flanked him, seating themselves with rehearsed poise. In that moment, I told myself, tonight is not their stage, it's mine. When Percy rose to speak, the hall hushed. He spoke of family, of second chances, of unity. He said, new beginnings, as if our past never existed. I held my breath. Then I rose from my seat. Before he could protest, I tapped my phone. The giant screen behind him flickered and lit up. The video played, Percy and Clarice at the Blue Lounge, signatures being passed, the scarf sliding off a chair, his name on the receipt. The room gasped. Percy's face paled. He reached for the mic, but I spoke first, voice clear. You said these nights were business expenses. Silence followed as guests shifted in their chairs. Thanks in advance stood hot-faced. You can't just play this out in public, she began. I raised my hand. That blue dress wasn't borrowed. Thanks in advance. It was a gift. I held up our marriage certificate, receipts, notes proof. I read aloud. Next time, don't forget the blue dress. See. The hall went quiet. Even the chandelier seemed to pause. Percy's voice cracked when he tried to step in. She's unstable, she's dramatizing, he stammered. I cut him off. Don't turn my pain into your alibi. Then I pressed play on another file. That recording played his voice admitting, I needed someone younger. A hush swallowed the crowd. I held up the wedding ring, the one he gave me years ago, the one now in someone else's hand. This ring belonged to me, I said, and so did those promises. Thanks. In advance began to cry. Dishon's jaw dropped. Percy recoiled as every lie I ever swallowed turned into truth in front of everyone. I exhaled. This ends tonight. He leaned in, voice low and venomous. You'll regret this. I met his stare. I already did once. Behind him, someone whispered. He turned, nodded. I heard, destroy her. But I walked forward. The room watched. I walked out of his shadow and into light. The porch was still damp with morning. I sat there, wrapped in my robe, holding a warm cup of tea like it held more than just honey and lemon. It held quiet. The kind that don't come easy. Birds were chirping. The radio in the kitchen played soft jazz like it knew not to disturb the peace. It had been 2 weeks since the gala, since everything came loose and then settled in a new way. I hadn't cried since that night, and not because I was holding it in. I just didn't need to anymore. The rage had burned off, and what was left was something clearer, sharper, but lighter. Word had gotten around. Percy left town. Somebody said he moved, somewhere out west, trying to disappear where no one knew what he'd done. Clarice? She packed up and went back to Louisiana. Probably back to that big house her mama left her. Far as I knew, she wasn't answering any questions. I wasn't asking any. Thanks in advance called me once. Left a voicemail. She started it with Mama, but nothing else came through. I heard the breathing though. I heard her trying to find words. I didn't call her back. Not out of spite. I'm just letting silence do the talking for now. Sometimes healing don't require a slam. Sometimes you just close the door and let the quiet be the answer. Later that morning, I decided to stop by the community center. Didn't tell nobody I was coming. I just pulled up, walked inside like I used to. Folks looked up and smiled like they'd been waiting on me. Some nodded, some called out, some just gave me that look. That kind of look only folks who've seen your storm can give you. A young woman approached me, no more than 30, holding her purse like it was armor. "Miss Gina," she said, voice shaky. "Thank you. What you did. I left my husband. I didn't know I could until I saw you stand there and tell the truth." I touched her hand. "You could have done it the whole time, baby," I said. "You just needed to see it done by somebody who looked like you." A lady from my Bible study leaned over from a folding chair and said, "Girl, you walked through fire and didn't even smell like smoke." I chuckled. I walked through it holding God's hand and my own. On my way out, I checked my phone. One new message on the podcast. Not many folks knew I'd been recording. I did it quiet, under another name. Just my voice late at night, telling stories, some mine, some borrowed, but all real. I called it The Quiet Witness. It was my way of keeping others company in their silent battles. And every now and then, someone wrote in to say, "I thought I was the only one." That's all I needed. I went home and pulled out the old photo album from the hall closet. Dust on the cover, but memories still fresh inside. Pictures of me, young and wide-eyed. My babies, toothy grins, arms around my neck. Even one of Percy and me before it all got complicated. I looked at it for a long while. Then I took it out and placed it gently into a box I'd labeled with black marker. Lessons, not luggage. I stepped outside, gloves on, trowel in hand, and started planting lavender along the front yard. The scent, sharp and sweet, wrapped around me. Neighbors waved from across the street. One little boy shouted, "Hi, Miss G!" and kept pedaling past like nothing had changed. And maybe nothing had except me. As the sun began dipping down, I turned on the small camera I kept tucked in the bookshelf. I didn't write a script, didn't rehearse. I just looked into the lens and said, "You've been on this journey with me. This story, it wasn't just about betrayal. It was about rediscovery." I leaned in. "Let me tell you something. You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep other folks warm. You don't owe nobody your peace just 'cause they shared your blood." I took a breath. Don't wait for someone to write your story. Pick up the pen. Write the truth, even if your voice shakes. I smiled for the first time in a while. That didn't feel half-hearted. To my people, here and online, thank you all for listening, for believing me, for believing in me. I looked up at the sky. The clouds had turned gold, and the breeze kissed the back of my neck. I touched the chain around my neck, the wedding ring now hanging from it. It didn't feel like a weight anymore. It felt like a lesson. I survived. I ain't who I was, I whispered. And that's the best part. I looked straight into the camera like I was talking to one soul sitting across from me. And if you're still in the storm, baby, don't stop walking.